everyone, it's Mangino. Welcome to the Mangino Talks Pittsburgh podcast. I've been a radio talk show host for half of my life and nearly half of that right here in Pittsburgh. And so on my podcast, we talk about everything that matters to us all, from current events to Pittsburgh history, social issues to sports, politics, to practical day-to-day life. And today I want to talk about education, primarily as it's focused on Pittsburgh Public Schools. There's a concern regarding discipline issues at the school, the entire district. And one of the tools that they have available to them is to issue summary citations. Now, these citations are the lowest form of criminal citation that a police officer could give. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, about the importance of this, the value that it has in keeping proper order and discipline within the school, and then the concern that some people have that it's not being used in a fair and equitable way regarding individuals and their sex and race. We'll get to that coming up a little bit later on. Also, I want to talk about the concerns regarding teachers in general. And this is something that Pittsburgh Public Schools is facing. In fact, schools all over the region, all over the state, all over the country are facing this. The problem is that teachers are quitting in really dramatic numbers. I mean, we have a quit rate, if you will, that is at a record level. According to Penn State Center for Education Evaluation and Policy Analysis, they found that 7.7% of Pennsylvania teachers, or a total of 9,587, left their positions between 21 and 22 and the 22 and 23 school years. The number has slowly risen over the past 2 years. It was at 5.4% in 21, at 6.2% in 22, and it exceeds the 7.5% attrition rate that was recorded in 2015 at the conclusion of that school year. And the numbers are startling because not only are we having people who are leaving the profession, we're not having as many young people who are wanting to go into the profession. And then as a result, a teacher shortage. And there are multiple reasons for this, and we'll get into that in a moment. One of the great concerns is that we're losing a lot of minorities as teachers. 18% of black men who were teachers in 22 no longer employed as educators in Pennsylvania. That's 1 of every 5 black male teachers left the teaching profession. When it comes to black women as teachers, they lost at 16.4% attrition rate. Hispanic and multiracial men had attrition rates greater than 15%. And this is important in a couple of different ways. One, it's important for young minorities to see other minorities be in positions of teaching, respected, honored positions, science, mathematics, social studies. It's also beneficial for white students to be able to see minorities that are in these positions, learned, educated people, well-skilled, well-trained, teaching. It's collectively good for our society and acknowledging and recognizing the great melting pot that we are not monolithic when it comes to the issue of race. But the numbers that are falling off when it comes to those who are black, Hispanic, multiracial, it's disturbing. And as attrition rates continue to rise, the number of teaching certificates issued across the state decreasing, as I mentioned before. The numbers continue to fall off. Pittsburgh Public Schools, they saw 84 teacher resignations in the past school year. That's 20 more than took place in 2019, right before the pandemic. Some of the reasons that are cited: low unemployment. If you have low unemployment rates, then people with educations see opportunities to be able to leave one profession and then go to another, because so oftentimes the requirement for a college degree is not specific to a particular field. It's just that you have one. And if you have one, you have a leg up, and they're taking advantage of those opportunities. You also have the issue of harder working conditions. Some of those harder working conditions are because of student behavior, kids acting out and there isn't that level of reinforcement of the expectation of good behavior from parents back home. The misbehavior at school is defended instead of being disciplined by parents. And then you have teachers having less autonomy to make classroom decisions. You have administrators that are wanting to get into the classroom and then micromanage. You have board members that are wanting to do that even more so. And then you have parents that, although parental involvement in a kid's education is clearly important, it should be from the standpoint of what can I do to help you educate the children? What can I do to help you educate my child? Can I volunteer in order to help you educate the class? But instead, what oftentimes happens is that you have parents that want to come in and make classroom decisions and then tell teachers how they ought to be teaching their class. And they're the ones that went to school and got the education in teaching. Now, this isn't all that far-flung because there are some states around the country that they have very low bars of expectation of academics and training, certifications, and degrees to become a teacher. These states think that all you need basically is a warm body and somehow education is then imparted to kids. No formal training necessary whatsoever. In fact, my understanding is that there are some schools in some states that if they're running a little low on teachers that day, they'll actually ask the parents, oh, by the way, as you're dropping off little Johnny, you mind filling in for us? We could use a teacher today. You're also looking at the issue of with low unemployment and the attraction for other jobs is the pay rate. And right now, starting salaries for both the Pittsburgh Public Schools and a couple of others, right around $50,000 a year. There is a push to guarantee teachers that they make at least $60,000 a year. What's interesting to note is the wages for Pittsburgh Public Schools. It's kind of in the middle. It's not at the highest end of wages. And then you have to ask yourself, for the school districts that are struggling the most, do they have the best teachers? And part of getting the best teachers is offering the best salaries. And they're not able to do that. Many of the school districts that are poor performing are poor school districts and just don't have the revenues in order to offer those very enticing salaries to the best and the brightest for those who could teach. There's a concern about a lack of respect for teachers. This idea that teachers are not to be considered. Teachers are somehow less than. I don't know about you. When I went to school, my parents imparted upon me that I was to respect and honor the teacher as though I was dealing with my parent in the classroom. They made it very clear that they are the parent in their stead. Don't talk back. Don't act out. Do as you are told to. Follow directions. Do not be a discipline issue. Behave yourself. That's not happening. It's not. And I don't blame teachers for being frustrated by this. There's also concern about workloads that are just greater than what they can bear. And I can get that too. We live in a society to where we want more and more out of the individual that's doing whatever the work is that's in front of them. And we deal with that in the private sector, and it's coming into the public sector as well when it comes to education. But considering that we're talking about teachers that are going to be laying the foundation educationally for our children to have the maximum opportunity available to them upon graduation, you can't expect people as teachers to do their very best if you're asking them to do way more than is reasonable for them to do. I don't think that's all that difficult for us to grasp. We deal with the same frustrations, don't we? You know, how many more things can the boss put on my plate and expect me to do all of it perfectly? It just doesn't happen that way. Concerns about teachers having limited time to complete planning or paperwork during the workday. And then as a result, there's more of that work that gets shifted over to off school time, cutting into their family time. And there's more and more of this interest of a proper work-life balance, right? And if they're not able to get it with the low unemployment, they're then able to find opportunities elsewhere. You have also the issue of just burnout. It just becomes too much, too taxing, too overwhelming. It's all understandable. And so what do we do in order to attract more teachers? What do we do in order to convince teachers that they ought to stay? Let's go ahead and explore that. And I also want to explore the issue of the summary citations as well. With Nina Esposito-Visgitis, she is the president of the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers, and this issue of the summary citations. Pittsburgh Public Schools, they have the ability with their police officers to issue citations. And these citations are described as the most minor type of criminal offense in the state and is issued for nonviolent crimes such as disorderly conduct and harassment. They have been viewed as a very, very important tool for the police officers in the schools to be able to use to rein in bad behavior. And that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If you had a speed limit and the speed limit was never enforced, nor was there a threat of enforcement, then you would have people who would violate that law. The reason why we obey laws, some of us just because, well, the law's there and that's good enough for us. But there are others that are not going to unless there are consequences for bad behavior. And children who are always looking at ways of pushing the envelope to see what they can get away with, if there isn't enforcement, they will do that. So let's talk about the issue of summary citations and the police officers inside the school district that have the authority just as any other police officer would have anywhere, except for the fact that the officers inside Pittsburgh Public Schools do not carry firearms. But otherwise, they have the authority. Let's welcome Nina Esposito-Visgitis to the program. She, once again, the president of the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers.
City police don't have to call, before they give a citation, they don't have to call in and talk about it with their supervisor. I think the district provides a lot of safeguards so summary citations are given out judiciously. And I'm sure we can improve. We need to talk about it, but that is our officers, but unless it's cut and dry, like, this was dangerous, they call and talk before they give a citation. They get permission from their supervisor or the chief. I don't think city police do that.
Okay. So these issues of summary citations that are being suspended, what is the significance in your mind of having these summary citations being issued in the first place? I mean, once again, I'm thinking back to when I was in school. If there was a kid that acted up, you went down to the assistant principal's office, and one of the assistant principals was the expert disciplinarian and took care of those issues. The importance of summary citations and the proper discipline and structure of an orderly manner inside of a school inside of Pittsburgh Public Schools.
Well, there has to be accountability on everybody's end. Everybody in the school should be accountable. Seems to be mostly on teachers, I must say. And I want to say this, we have the best students in the world. I think they're great. I wouldn't have wanted to teach anywhere else, and I want to make that clear. However, sometimes a student does need something to kind of put the stake in the sand and say, we do not accept that at this school. And students have to be accountable too. It is my knowledge, and I'm not in the schools anymore, but from talking to teachers, and teachers can't give them out. They can't say, hey, I want this kid to get a summary citation. It's a decision between the police officer and maybe administration and their boss, but they are given as kind of a warning. They do not follow, unless it's a felony, it does not follow the student, as some of our board members are saying. It does not follow them throughout their life and prevent them from getting jobs. But sometimes, and once again, I don't want any student to be zinged with a summary citation. Certainly not our families, who are great for the most part. But there are times when it is appropriate that we have to be judicious about it. I do think the school district has been, with having to go through a chain before you can even give one. But sometimes I do believe that accountability will scare a kid straight. Certainly would have worked on me. When a teacher told me something, how high do you want me to jump? So sometimes that it is needed, but it should be judicious, absolutely. So I do disagree with the suspension. I worry they'll make it more than a suspension.
Well, my concern is that with this suspension that's in place now, obviously the school year not in session at the time of this recording. However, if it stays in place when school comes back into session normally in the fall, that if there isn't an enforcement of a rule, then there's a greater propensity to then break that rule. Whatever that rule may be. It could be something as simple as a speed limit, but if everybody knows nobody's going to bother to enforce it, there will be those that will go well beyond the posted speed limit and be extremely dangerous. My concern is that if that is the understanding, that those that otherwise would be getting these citations and have their behavior reined in because of the concern of getting one, it will then cause greater concerns for behavior treatment, the safety and security for other students that are there, and the staff and teachers as well.
Absolutely. And I do hope that parents will speak up so it doesn't sound, because many of the citations were brought about by parents because it was student on student and the parents would demand it. What is so upsetting? I hope that parents speak up, because what you said is absolutely true. I can't tell you how many times teachers have mentioned to me in certain schools that students have told students are smart. We want them to be aware and bright, but they're aware that the accountability on students is dwindling. And a lot of this has been from our school board, and students are aware of it, and they have used it according to teachers, and they're really going to use this one because what will be done to them, not what will their accountability be? It's less and less, and they know it. They know teachers have less and less accountability, going back to why more and more teachers are leaving the profession, because you feel helpless in your own classroom to make a difference and to teach the other 28 kids that want to learn if one student's having a bad day. It's very, very frustrating.
According to School Director Pam Harbin, 44% of citations were issued to black students for disorderly conduct, 33% for harassment, and 52% of the students are black within the school district. If 44% of the citations were issued to black students and they make up 52% of the population of the school, I'm having a difficult time processing how there's a concern of discrimination being used in applying these citations and issuing these citations in the first place.
Well, and she often cites those kind of, but I don't think they're accurate. We have said, and I've even testified to this at a public hearing, we don't want, if anything, to be biased against any of our students. Let's sit down and look at it. Let's look at it. I think she throws terms around that shouldn't be thrown around. Once again, could we include some teachers? Can we talk to the school police? Let's look at the data, talk about it, instead of, okay, let's suspend them. And too often, some people on our school board, that's what they do instead of, let's talk about this, let's research it, let's make it better. They just throw it out and think things will get better in our schools, once again, without going into them to see what's really happening. Very frustrating.
It is clearly important that if you're going to make an assessment of something, that it's one thing to be able to have a knee-jerk reaction just as a general public person. But if you're on the board and you have all of this information that's otherwise available to you, and I would guess board members clearly would be able to have the information available to them from the administration, from the Pittsburgh Public Schools police, to be able to research this and collect all the data necessary to come back with an informed and intelligent opinion, rather than a knee-jerk reaction that's more sensational than it is foundational.
Absolutely. And I've even been at meetings where the head of research, or I can't remember his title, was in the meeting, and parents or community members would present some of the data that they got from a certain board member, and he even said, where did you get that data? That's not PPS data. It worries me, the sensationalism that's happening out there, instead of people sitting down to make things better for students. Everybody wants, it's like some people want to win instead of doing what makes sense. So I think you're absolutely right. So let's just knee-jerk, let's get rid of citations. But they're not in the classroom. They don't live it every day. I really wish they would try to. I'd love for them to be a classroom teacher for a day. I bet they wouldn't make it through the day.
Yeah, one of the quotes that I was really surprised by as well is from Salah Uddin, who said this: when we look at the percentage, the disproportionate percentage of citations being issued to black students, and especially black girls, I think some of us ask ourselves, why is this? And I think the answer that we come up with is to blame the students, to blame them for the behavior. We don't blame ourselves. We don't point the finger at ourselves, and that's where the finger needs to be pointed. That doesn't make any sense to me. In my perspective, if you have a discipline issue, the person who is behaving poorly needs to ask themselves, what are they doing? Why are they doing? And it's on them. I don't know that it's the fault of the teachers or the administration that's the cause of behavior that is acting out in a school that would cause others to be unsafe.
And you're right. Too often we blame teachers, administrators in the school because no one wants to blame the students. But once again, are we providing the support? And this is what the school board should be asking themselves. Are you providing the supports so teachers have the authentic supports to help every student? If Nina, I'll use myself, is having a bad day, who do they have? Who can the teacher go to get support for Nina? Because they have 28 other students looking at them, waiting to be taught. And I want to talk to Nina, who's having a bad day. I have 28 other students I'm accountable for. That's what maybe he should look at, is bringing in the proper support so there is somewhere for Nina to go. But we don't have in-house anymore. He better look at looking at authentic supports for teachers and why so many teachers are leaving the district. I wish they'd talk about that at a board meeting.
Nina, it sounds to me as though they have a standard for teachers that is completely unrealistic, and not a one of these parents apply that in their own life.
Absolutely.
When their child is acting out, their own flesh and blood is acting out, they don't sit back and say, wow, I wonder what's happening with little Bobby today, with little Susie today. I got to get into what the reasoning is for why they just slapped their sister. No, they go in there, deal with that, and then we can figure out what the problems may be at some point. But it's almost as though they expect teachers to be absolutely perfect in every scenario without the support of the school board and without the support of many of the parents who are sending their kids to the school in the first place.
You know, and that's a very good point. I know when I went to school, the teacher was always right. Not that we're always right. We're human. But when I sent my 3 boys to school, I did tell them that when a teacher tells you to jump, what do you say? And they'll still, how high, Mom? I know. It's a matter of trust. Do you trust the people that you're giving your most precious, possession? It's not really a possession, to. Do you trust them? And I think we're really lacking trust. We hear it at the school board. Obviously, Saul Osteen isn't trusting our teachers. Pam Harbin isn't trusting our teachers for their knowledge, for their know-how, and I'll be honest, for their love of our kids. Nobody goes into teaching for the money. You love kids. You have a passion for kids.
Right.
We're not perfect. We are not. But someone should be talking to teachers more instead of blaming and pointing their fingers at them.
And Nina, when do you think this began to change, where people had a different perspective? Because when I went to school, it was the same way. I mean, my parents were like, listen, you're a Mangino. Do not do a thing to bring any embarrassment or dishonor to the Mangino name. And when you go to school, You listen to them the same way you listen to me. And whatever happens to you at school when it comes to punishment, it's twice as bad when you come home. When do you, in all of your years of experience, when did you begin to see things change to where they are now, to where it's primarily the teacher's fault when there's bad behavior in school, when there are poor grades in school? Whatever the issues are, it's somehow a teacher's fault.
Wow, boy, is that an excellent question. That is, and thinking back, I mean, a lot of things changed, and I've got to tell you, with No Child Left Behind, I don't mean to blame everything on that, but that's when all students had to go to college, and not all students. I mean, that it was a decimation of our career and technical education programs, because everyone has to go to college, and meanwhile, the career and technical education, wow, so many wonderful fields. So, boy, that is such an excellent question. When did we lose this trust? I know that's been coming for a while, that teachers are not revered like they are in a lot of, I'm sure you always hear about Finland, and other places where teachers are revered. And here in the United States, where, you're right, I'm trying to think of when that was lost.
For me,
I don't know. That's
one of the things
question.
Nina, one of the things that I have said on my show consistently is that if you show me a failing school district, I'll show you failing parents. Now, I realize that is not something that you may want to feel comfortable in saying, but you have to have parents who are actively involved, engaged, and recognize the value of the education and this opportunity. I mean, we are granting everyone, according to the Constitution of this Commonwealth, 12 years of education, setting them up for a future that they can then go do whatever they want to. Maybe it's a technical school that they want to go to and develop a trade. Maybe they want to go on to college and university and get a doctorate degree, whatever it might be. But we're giving them this opportunity for free. And I have a friend of mine who's in his 90s now. He came from the old country in Italy. If you didn't show that you had a propensity to go to school beyond the 6th grade, you just didn't go. And you had to pay to be able to go out of your own pocket if your family could afford for you to go. If not, sorry, you're back out with the sheep and you're tending the goats. How is it that we don't value the education that is being provided to us, for our children, and then have this full vested interest that the best ticket to prosperity and opportunity is to get that education? I'm going to do all I can to drive it into you as my child, that you're going to make the most out of this opportunity given to you.
And, I see what you're saying, because the value of growing up, I'm still like this. Education means more to me than if you are a millionaire. But education really does impress me, and it should. I do see where there's a great partnership between school and the parent and administration too, in the district, and you're all on the same page. I see the best education of all. That's when the magic really happens, and it can happen when you work in tandem together, you work in partnerships. Mm-hmm. When you are suspicious of each other and everything the teacher does is an affront, that becomes problematic. So we really do need to increase the community. And I hope, and many of our schools, I know that they do want parents to come in. That's part of the community school model too. Mm-hmm. They want parents to come in and be part of the school. That is when public education is at its best, when you work in partnership to help all of our students. I do believe that so strongly, and we have to build those ties more.
One more thing. What can we do, individuals do, to make a difference, to help teachers to want to stay in the teaching profession, to encourage young people to want to become teachers, to make the atmosphere and the quality of the education be at its peak? What can we do collectively as people listening in society in general?
Oh, there's so many things we can do, but I'll narrow it down. Please, we have to exalt teaching. Students hear people bashing teachers, And then why would they want to go into it when you know your teacher looks exhausted, your parents are bashing them, the community is saying they can't do this and that? We've got to exalt it. All of us work together and see the importance of teaching and support our teachers. Secondly, and I'll just give two because I have a list of 20, but I think this is so important. People can go and support them. Go to your school board, demand that teachers have the support they need. Don't lament about, well, this school district has this and we have this. Go to your school board and make sure their priorities are right. Go into a school, volunteer. Oh boy, that gives me chills just thinking of it. Go in and volunteer. Help the teachers. See what the teachers are doing. See what they go through every day. Become a partner. We've all got to get this right. These are our kids we're talking about. Become a partner in education. It's not don't just leave it up to the teachers to do all the work. People saw how hard teaching was during COVID, and everybody exalted. It was on James Corbin and all the late night talk shows. It shouldn't just be a COVID thing. Exalt teachers, help them, make sure they have the supports they need, and you better be a partner. You better be a partner because it is a partnership. You can't do it one-sided.
Nina Esposito-Visgitis, once again, president of the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers, joining us on Mangino Talks. Nina, thank you very much for your time. Do appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nina. And I want to thank you for listening to the Mangino Talks podcast. Please be sure to click the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. For more on me and the show, also visit manginotalks.com. If there is a topic that you would like me to talk about or a guest that you would like me to have on, send me an email, mangino@manginotalks.com. Follow me on your favorite social media platform by using @ManginoTalks. And then once you find me, please like, follow, subscribe, and share the pages with your friends and your family. And thanks again for listening to the Mangino Talks podcast.